Last week's debate was another chance for Kamala Harris to introduce herself to voters. But afterwards, a new poll showed that 25% said they still need to learn more about her. Joining me now to discuss, Stuart Stevens, a veteran of the Mitt Romney and George W. Bush presidential campaigns. He is now with the Lincoln Project, and MSNBC contributor Brian Tyler Cohen. His new book, Shameless Republicans, Deliberate Dysfunction and the Battle to Preserve Democracy, is out now. This whole I need to know more about her, Kamala Harris is not running for perfect. She's running against Donald Trump. So what is it that people don't know about her when they know every possible thing there is to know about Donald Trump and still they're not sure?
It's the right question, but at this point, I think people just want to make sure that answer whatever questions they might have about her. But at this point, look, I think it's incumbent upon her to keep doing these interviews because we know interviews, town halls, rallies, because we know that the more people learn about her, the more they like her, the more they hear from Donald Trump, the less they like him. And so, which I think is perfect, because whenever Donald Trump feels backed into a corner, the immediate strategy that he reverts to is get me in front of as many people as humanly possible. And when he does that, he says stuff like he said at the National Association of Black Journalists, which is that Kamala's not black. He says what he said at the Mar-a-Lago press conference, which is my crowd sizes are bigger than Martin Luther King Jr.'s. I have a dream speech crowd. So
hold on, he went on TV last night and was talking about how much the crowd loved him at the debate. Yep. Reality check. There was no audience. Can we talk about undecided voters? Help me, Stuart, because in my mind, when I close my eyes, I cannot picture who this person is, who is an engaged voter, who's got, a notebook in their house, like Trump did this, she did that, Trump did this, Kamala did that. Like, who are these undecided voters? Where do they live?
I think these fall into two categories. People who aren't going to vote. And people never like to tell pollsters they don't intend to vote. And when they do say that, they just get kicked out of polls. They don't continue with the questionnaires. Or they're going to be Harris voters, because Trump has his vote. They know that. There's nobody here who is thinking, well, am I going to vote for Donald Trump? The question is, he's not in the persuasion business, he's in the turnout business. And this is why I think this is going to be driven by fave, unfave. If you look at so-called undecided voters, they usually break by fave, unfave, which makes sense, because are you going to show up to vote for some candidate that you have an unfavorable opinion of? You would just stay at home. You wouldn't vote. Or you'd vote for somebody else on the ballot and leave it blank. So I think these polls are misleadingly neutral to negative for Harris, when in fact the structure of the polls are actually much better. Like what she's getting with African-American voters. They're showing her 78% or so in the Times poll. That's not going to happen. She's going to get 91% of the black vote. I mean, in 64, Goldwater got 7%. Trump got 8%. That's 1 point every 56 years. It's not going to change this year. So I think that's 11% of the polls. So I think these polls are actually better news for Harris than for Trump. And I think the Trump campaign understands this, which is why they're sort of flailing around and are panicked.
But are swing voters more significant in this election? Because you've got all those Nikki Haley voters, right? She's endorsed Donald Trump, but she's not out there campaigning with him. Yeah. Laura Loomer is. And you know who Laura Loomer is not going to help Trump get? Swing voters.
Yeah. Look, I think that most of the Haley vote was a non-Trump vote. And I think that vote is very much up for grabs now. They're either not going to vote or they're going to vote for Harris. So I think this whole question, would you like to know more about somebody? If you think about it, if you got asked that question, you're going to say no. I know everything I need to know. It's a very odd question. Of course, you say, I'd like to know more. I mean, if it was a British baking show and you said, would you like to know more about a recipe? You go, yeah, I'd like to know more about the recipe. Who's going to say no? So I think it's actually surprising that that number isn't higher.
That is very interesting. When you look at the people Donald Trump is surrounding himself with right now, the things he's saying, whether it's the eating the dogs and cats, whether it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders dogging on being a step parent, if what they've already have their base as fired up as they're going to get. So does Kamala Harris. If the answer is you need to win undecided voters, how is the current Republican strategy doing any of that?
It's not. I mean, the fact is that everything Donald Trump says, all of the people he surrounds himself with are just doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the people who are already Trump fans. But I think in his mind, he is just so focused on the instant gratification of getting adulation from his fans, from his audience, the low-hanging fruit, throwing red meat out to his base because he knows he's going to get the affection from them, the applause from them immediately. That's just too much. That's just too much of a draw for him to reject in service of reaching out to those Nikki Haley voters, the people who he actually needs to be reaching out to if he wants any hope of actually winning this election. I mean, you had just alluded to the fact that the only way forward for him is actually going to be expanding his coalition by surrounding himself with the Laura Loomers of the world and making Marjorie Taylor Greene the face of the Republican Party, and J.D. Vance, which was a pick that was basically just a clone of Donald Trump himself. There was no reaching out to independents. There was no reaching out to people of a different nationality or religion, getting somebody from battleground state. All of these choices are picked from Donald Trump just to basically double down because he only knows how to reach out to the exact people who already support him.
But isn't that colossally stupid? Okay, it's being reported that I love just even thinking about this, that Pete Buttigieg is performing the role of J.D. Vance in the debate prep for Tim Walz.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? And how important is this debate?
I think the debate's real important. And I think Buttigieg's a great choice for that. I'm a believer in mock debates. All these debate preps I did, I think they were always better if you had someone who really took playing that person seriously. And Buttigieg is just unbelievably smart, unbelievably facile with this. And he'll be a better J.D. Vance than J.D. Vance, which is what you want. You want to walk out. It's like an athlete. You want to walk out and feel like, I practiced against guys that are better than the team that I'm playing now. I think the debate is really going to count because it's going to be one of the last times to reset what's happening inside the Trump campaign. And Brian's exactly right. What he's saying is the Trump campaign doesn't know how to reach out. And Trump really doesn't want to reach out because Trump's feeling is if you're not for him, you're a bad person. There's something wrong with you, not that there's something wrong with my candidacy or me. And when you look at the world that way, it becomes very narrow. And he's never been able to get over 47%. So I think you've got half the country is 53% non-MAGA, maybe 47% MAGA. And that's why at the end of the day, relatively speaking, I don't think this race is going to be that close. I don't think it'll be as close as 20 was.